Now, India has pulled out of the World University Games in China over stapled visas that have been issued to Arunachal-based athletes. This decision came hours after airport authorities in New Delhi stopped an 8-member wushu contingent comprising of 5 athletes, a coach and 2 support staff at the boarding gate just minutes before departure. The Ministry of External Affairs has said that this move is unacceptable. As a mark of protest, India has withdrawn its entire martial arts team from the Games. This is not the first time that China has done this to Arunachal athletes when it comes to international sporting events. Stapled visas is one of the tactics that China uses to push its territorial claims over Arunachal Pradesh. A foreign policy objective it has pursued for many years because of the dispute over the line of actual control. China has altered its maps to include Arunachal Pradesh, and time and again it's issued lists renaming places within Arunachal Pradesh while boosting the build-up along the line of actual control. While diplomacy has been unable to achieve a solution to this dispute, is it time for India to draw the red line? If you are going to issue stapled visas to athletes and others from Arunachal Pradesh, then should India do the same for those from Tibet? But first, the story.
वीजा ही नहीं दिया था।
3 लोगों पे ही ऑब्जेक्शन लिया जो अरुणाचल प्रदेश से।
ये 3 लोग ही है सर, जो अरुणाचल प्रदेश के हमारे बच्चे हैं, तीनों बच्चे। हमारे ये 5 प्लेयर जिन्होंने बहुत मेहनत की है, मेडल लेके आए, हम चाहते हैं कि ये लोग तो जाए।
We are from Arunachal. 3 people are from Arunachal Pradesh, so we apply our visa for our World University Games, but we got staple visa. We were hoping that we will get visa, but fortunately we couldn't get our visa.
This is unacceptable, and we have lodged our strong protest with the Chinese side, reiterating our consistent position on the matter.
Prime Minister Modi has softened the stand with China. Therefore, only we are in a back of wicket. Now they can give staple visa to our Arunachal friends. Arunachal is part of India, and the government should be very strong in dealing with Chinese on this thing.
RP Singh is national spokesperson of the BJP. Lieutenant General retired Sanjay Kulkarni, ex-DG of Infantry, is joining us. Aina Tangent is a political commentator from Beijing. RP Singh, the government did the right thing. You can't have stapled visas to a bunch of athletes from Arunachal Pradesh, which is an integral part of India. If the Chinese are going to do this, and mind you, they've been doing this from 2009-10 when the UPA was in power, then India should start giving stapled visas to those from Tibet. Quid pro quo.
Well, Zaka, the message is loud and clear that we will not accept anything of this sort, and they have to be made very clear that Arunachal is very much part of India. They should not even think of or any sort of misadventure with us, Arunachal, even of a smallest thing like issuing a staple visa to our residents of Arunachal. One. Secondly, China has to be very clear on this also, that it's not India of 2000 or earlier, it's India which is of 2023, which will talk on equal terms and terms which are suitable and conducive to us, not terms which are conducive to you. Thirdly, if any sort of, I reiterate, any sort of misadventure at the border will be responded back.
All right, we've lost the line with RP Singh. We'll go back to him in a moment. General Kulkarni, the stapled visa is just a symptom of the problem. The problem, actually, the diagnosis of the problem is that China thinks, and it claims all of Arunachal Pradesh, it refuses to recognize the LAC or the McMahon line, and it basically, has gone to the extent of even renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh. The point is, India still continues, in all its official documentation, continues to insist on what is called the One China policy. If China can't agree on one India, which includes Arunachal Pradesh, then why should India continue to parrot this One China policy? We should say that Tibet is a separate entity.
Thank you, Zaka. I think Chinese believe in the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without a fight. And I fully agree with you that it's time, because it's been on since 2010. And when the Northern Army commander was given a stapled visa and he did not go there, but they have been on and off. When subsequently, before that, JJ went, he wasn't given a stapled visa. And when these kind of things, when just because at that point of time they said Jammu and Kashmir is disputed, now Arunachal is disputed, they call it South Tibet, and all this has been happening since about 2010. I think it's time the Chinese understand that we too are neighbors and that we are both old civilizations. It's not the way that, despite all the treaties since 1993, peace and tranquility, border management, all of it there, the Chinese have violated it. And look what they've done it in 2020 and subsequently. I think if China wants good relations with India, it is better that China at least does not indulge in issuing staple visas, which are definitely unacceptable and shows high-handedness that, well, we can get away with it. The same athletes are likely to be participating as part of Asian Games, which are going to be held in China from September 23rd. Well, if that be so, then the entire event may just be called off by India saying that, well, staple visas are not acceptable. They have to be, and I'm sure China understands, but these kind of tactics by the Chinese is definitely not acceptable. I go along with you that yes, if not staple visas, we should start giving them boarding visas to the Chinese coming from Tibet to India, because that's the only way tit for tat.
So I want to ask Aina Tangent, the contention that China has always had with India is over the line of actual control. It's largely over the fact that, both sides have differing perceptions and it's not been demarcated, so on and so forth. But in the case of Arunachal, the first big official claim from the Chinese government came in the early 2000s. For a good 40-50 years after both countries became independent, there was no claim over Arunachal. It was always over Aksai Chin or what is called the western and middle sectors in India. But it was never over the eastern side. And that really came to the fore only in the early 2000s. And, the point that is being made is Arunachal Pradesh was always an integral part of India. Just because the Chinese conveniently found that there is a Tibetan Buddhist shrine, a very holy shrine that happens to be based in Arunachal Pradesh, you can't just lay claim over 3,000-4,000 square kilometers of land, because if that were the contention, then why did you go back in 1962? In 1962, if your claim was that you claim all of Arunachal Pradesh, then you went back. There was no concept of, a Buddhist shrine back then in 1962 when the war happened. So the point that is being made is that this is a double standard that's being enforced by China, perhaps with an eye on what's happening in the western sector, perhaps with an eye on the strategic import of what is happening in Aksai Chin. But you can't just raise a claim on a piece of territory which you've never had any claim to for thousands of years.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
Yes. The question is, why did China suddenly wake up after 50 years to claim a part of Indian territory, sovereign Indian territory, which you never claimed for 50 years?
Well, first off, India as a nation didn't really exist many, many years ago. I mean, it's a compilation of things that were put together by the British Empire and then named India.
Come on. No, 1 sec. No, I take grave offense to that, and it's factually incorrect. I'm sorry. I can educate you about Indian history, but to say that India as a nation did not exist before the British is absolutely, pedestrian knowledge of India. But go on.
All right. Well, it was a series of different entities that you can call India, but did not exist as India itself. So, I mean, you can. You don't know,
Mr. Tangent, that the word India comes from the Indus Valley civilization, which is thousands of years old, right? You don't know that.
That's another thing.
I mean, come on. I don't want to make this debate on contemporary politics between India and China into a history lesson, but surely the word India comes from the Indus Valley civilization, which is a good 1,000+ years old. Anyway, go on.
Yes, it is indeed, but that does not necessarily mean that it was in existence. Let's go to 1962. The narrative from India is that it was attacked by China. China's narrative, backed up by numerous historians outside of India, including Western, say that it was India that precipitated the attack. China was successful in repelling India. They went in. They did after being successful withdraw 20 kilometers back. Now, that was an issue because they thought that this was an opportunity to achieve a peace settlement. Since that time, the line of actual control has been an ongoing issue. In terms of what is happening today and things, China says that it has the right to that area because it was an integral part of Tibet. That can be argued on both sides. All right. I'm not saying that I know for certain. The fact is that if you turn over any rock in any particular piece of land, it does not say who it belongs to. Historically, these areas have been in flux.
No, one second, Mr. Tangent. I'm sorry again. I don't want to go back into a history lesson, but the McMahon line, as I understand, was drawn in 1914-15. One second. The McMahon line in eastern India was drawn in 1914-15. Right. At that time, I could argue that there was no PRC. There was no China as it exists. It was Tibet. It was British India.
The line was never
and the line was drawn at that time. Now, I'm willing to buy your argument. I'm willing to buy your argument that the Chinese government could not recognize a line that was agreed upon by the Tibetan Kingdom and by British India. I'm okay with that. I find some merit in that argument. But my point is, you cannot, after 50 years, suddenly realize and suddenly start claiming 3,000 square kilometers in eastern India by saying, oh, by the way, one of the biggest shrines in Tibetan Buddhism happens to be there. One of the holiest figures in Tibetan Buddhism has been in exile from your country for the last 50 years. What about that?
Okay. Well, let's get to the issue at hand. You want to talk about the relations between India and China.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as your guests and you have pointed out, the issue of stapled visas has been around since 2009. So to claim surprise at this point seems a little odd. So far this year, in 2023, China has issued over 71,600 visas to Indians for various things, business, family, etc. India has not issued any visas, very, very few, and only in very exceptional cases. So, at this juncture, China is trying to reach out, in their opinion, and they're being rebuffed by India. From Beijing's point of view, this seems like a contrived way of trying to embarrass China at a time when, Asian countries are supposed to be pulling together. It is up to India whether it has its
in case you
teams
missed
go to
it,
these
in
university
2020,
games.
in 2020 the world between India and China changed because the status quo was unilaterally changed by China. But let me go to General Kulkarni. The fact of the matter is, General Kulkarni, that issue has still not been resolved. It is 3 years plus. There are at least 2 points where the status quo has not been restored. The other points, yes, de-escalation has happened, but I don't think a certain demilitarization has happened. So we are living with a new status quo. The point is, what we saw from the statement between the two NSAs when they met at the sidelines of the BRICS meeting, the BRICS NSAs meeting in South Africa last week, was that there was this meeting between the two principals, meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping in Bali, something that we had no idea of, something that the MEA did not reveal. But because the Chinese statement mentioned that, the MEA had to finally come clean and said, yes, the two of them did meet and they did agree that there is a need to stabilize the tensions on the border. Now, the point is, this is what the opposition has also been saying. If you want to have a conversation about China, you need to be honest about that conversation. And honesty entails that the ground reality between India and China on the border at the LAC has changed since 2020.
Zaka, first let me correct that the 1914 Simla Agreement was initialed by the Chinese. They did not endorse it for reasons that their own Chiang Kai-shek, and subsequently when the revolution took place and the communists came in power in 1949, and subsequently they had endorsed but not initial for whatever the internal problems that the Chinese had.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Saying that India did not exist is obviously wrong, because if the Chinese had a century of humiliation. So did we. For some, we were under the British rule.
Yep.
And therefore, in 1947, when India got independence, obviously whatever the British had left behind and all the agreements with them were being honored, and that was accepted. If China in 1949 became a communist China, they were supposed to be doing the same. But notwithstanding what the Chinese did, I think absolutely wrong, because China all along has been wanting to try and convey that, well, we matter and that we are the center of the universe and we don't care what you think about it. That will not, repeat, not be acceptable to India. And we have the wherewithal, whatever it be so. If after 1962 that he's trying to remind us, he knows very well what happened in 1967 at Nathula and Chola. He knows it very well, and therefore it is not worth it to try and threaten one another.
Okay. RP Singh, I'll give you the final word. It's been 3 years, sir. It's been 3 years. There has been a unilateral change of status quo. When can we get back to status quo ante as it existed before April 2020? RP Singh, very quickly, 30 seconds. I've got to wrap up. Thank you.
Well, for my Chinese friend, let me just remind them that I am a Sikh. I believe in my Granth, in which word Hindustan has been mentioned 500 years ago. And by the same saint who visited China, the Nanking as a place, and he visited China then and then went further to Iraq, Iran during his journey. So never ever think, I mean, be prepared and come prepared with the history, and then you should know more, read more of the history and the Indian history and this Asian history. Then probably you'll understand how ancient the nation is.
All right.
I just told you which is being mentioned in the Granth, in the book, the holy book. But that point aside, I mean, Zaka, be rest assured, the army is doing the best what it can do, and then we are working on it, and then whatever best possible, the army will do the needful.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll see how this plays out. But like I said, the staple visa issue has been hanging fire for the last 10 plus years now. And there is no reason, if China refuses to recognize and acknowledge Arunachal Pradesh as an integral part of India, there is absolutely no reason, no logical reason why India should accord that same status to Tibet and accord that same status to China by acknowledging the One China policy. India should start giving staple visas to those folks from Tibet who intend to visit India. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. We'll see you again tomorrow on Monday now. Thank you.